You are all good to go.
Great, thanks. Welcome everyone back from hopefully a wonderful summer. My name is Carrie Keenan. Jessica Chait and I are co-chairs of this committee, Chelsea Land Use, which usually meets monthly, and this is our September meeting. As per the governor's orders, we are still meeting remotely. This meeting is being recorded and is currently live streaming on YouTube. It will be accessible to everyone probably by tomorrow. The agenda for tonight is public and can be viewed on the Community Board 4 website. We encourage you to sign up for e-blast and get the agenda. If this is your first time at a Community Board 4 meeting, there are 3 things to know about this process. 1, after each presentation, first the committee will ask questions to the presenter. Then members of the public can ask questions or make a comment. Subsequently, the discussion goes back to the committee. Second, on some agenda items, the committee members may then next vote to make a recommendation, which usually results in a letter for the full board to vote on. And third, if you'd like to comment or ask a question after a presentation or after the committee has spoken, you must press the raised hand button on your screen, usually on the bottom right. And if you're calling in, use *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute. If there are any questions about what I just shared, please raise your hand now. Okay, seeing none. We'd love to have everyone do a quick introduction of themselves. Sorry, I'm trying to toggle between 2 screens. So if you're not here, Jessica, you want to go first?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. Nice to see you. Jessica Chait. I'm the co-chair of Chelsea Land Use. I'll turn it to Tina.
Hi, I'm Tina DiFelice Antonio. I live on West 26th between 6th and 7th.
You have to pass it on, Tina.
I'm not good with relay races, obviously. Paul?
I am Paul Devlin, former co-chair of Chelsea Land Use, current co-chair of Hell's Kitchen Land Use, and I'm going to pass it to Bert.
Everyone, I'm Bert Lazarin, a member of the committee from West Chelsea.
I pass it
I'll
on.
pass it on to Dave.
Hi, I'm Dave Haloka, and I'm a member of Community Board 4.
Would you care to pass it to me, David?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry, to Pamela Wolf.
Hello, everyone. I'm Pamela Wolf. I was a full board member of CB4 for, I believe, 12 years. And then I became a public member of CB4, and I serve on the Chelsea Land Use Committee. And I live in Chelsea. And to whom shall I pass it? Let's see, Paul, have you spoken up yet? No.
I did.
Betty.
How about to Betty?
Did? Well then, how about Betty?
Hi, good evening. My name is Betty McIntosh. I'm a member of the Chelsea Land Use Committee, and I live in Penn South.
Hector?
Good evening, everybody. I'm Hector Vasquez, a CB4 member and resident of Fulton Houses. And I'll pass it on to Peggy, if you're ready.
Hi, good evening. Peggy Coe, member of Chelsea Land Use Committee.
Great, we'll go to Viren and then, sorry.
Good job.
Hi, I'm Viren Brambin. I'm a member of Chelsea Land Use Committee. I pass it on to Rinal.
Good evening, everyone. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Right. Member of Chelsea Land Use Committee, a resident of Chelsea. I'm also on the WPE. I've been on the committee for going on a year and a half now.
Great. Now, who do you want to pass it to?
Oh, who hasn't spoken yet? Bert, has Bert spoken?
Yeah, we have Mike. We'll go to Mike, and then after Mike.
No. Okay, yeah, Mike, please.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, it's Mike Noble. I'm a member of the committee. I've been on the board for, I guess, about 10 years now. I live in Chelsea. Now I'll pass this along to Joe. Joe Restuccia.
Joe's a guest.
Who's a guest? Well then, Lowell Kern.
I'm here. I am here. I am a
been a member of the board for, what is it, 8 years now, 9 years, something like that. And I'm a member of the Chelsea Land Use Committee. And I'll send this on to Marty.
Good evening. I'm Marty DeCat. I guess I've been a member of the board since 2010. Good to see you all in your squares.
That's right. Brad, are you with us?
Good evening. My name is Brad Pasquarello. I'm a resident of Chelsea. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think last but not least is Kit.
Good evening, everybody. Kit Tollerson. I am a member of the Chelsea Land Use Committee, and I live in Chelsea.
Guys, I just have to say, we have like everyone here. This is really, I don't know if it was the agenda or people are just not outside because of the rainy weather, but way to go, Clue, for 100% attendance. Carrie, I'll kick it back to you. Sorry.
Awesome. So we have 4 items on the agenda tonight and 2 items under new business and some reporting to do. We are switching agenda items 2 and 3, the order, so that Joe can present and then bow out and not have to sit around while we go through all of our other stuff. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Daniel Ash for agenda item number 1, a presentation, 675 Avenue of the Americas, an LPC application to install 5 planters on the sidewalk in the Ladies Mile High Historic District, which is right outside of, as we all know, in Chelsea, Trader Joe's, Michael's, and Face Values, for those of us who have teenage daughters.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Daniel Ash. I work with Walter Gorman Engineering. I am an engineer there and a project manager. I'm representing the owner, 675 Avenue Americas LLC at 675 Avenue Americas, where we are looking to put in planters outside of our property. We filed originally with the Department of Transportation, which then told us we had to get landmarks approval first, which then told us to get community board approval first. So you might be seeing me more than once for different committees, but today is the first time. And am I able to share a screen, Jesse, or do you?
Yes, you are, Daniel.
Okay.
So you were just there for a second.
Was there, right? Okay, so you can see now?
Yep.
All right. So our building is a 6-story building. It's mostly office. You probably know better the ground level where there's Trader Joe's and Michael's. And so here's some current pictures of the site. We're hoping to make it a little more beautiful to put in planters. Other places in the neighborhood we saw had it. We were trying to figure out the best type of planters. And we went over with the DOT and their guidelines. They were pretty strict on the type of planter that was allowed, the exact size. So we then spoke with a landscape architect and a landscaper to figure out what we can put in that would meet their requirements. And so we picked locations that met the requirements for separation from the distances, from the corner of the property, from any parking meters. And we came upon our final decision of putting 5 planters here. As you could see, they're all going to be square planters. It's very similar to what this view is. DOT had requirements about the reveal, that it couldn't be touching the ground, that it had to be solid shape. So even though we did see other planters in the neighborhood that were different looking, we didn't feel that any of those met the requirements for the guidelines, and therefore we settled on this, that the DOT, in discussing with us, we've gone through their preliminary comments and we've answered all of that already. So they've seen these drawings and they have agreed with the type of planter and the locations. Here you can see some other planters in the neighborhood that we took pictures of nearby, but varying shapes and sizes, not big enough to meet the 64 cubic feet requirement that the DOT has. And that's how we came to our design. And I would be welcome to answer any questions that you have regarding that, or to re-show anything that you want to say.
Great, thank you. I'm gonna just give a little bit of background on what we've done since we got this application. We've just been going back and forth with LPC to ask them, what are exactly the rules around planters? And this is a note, I quote directly from their note. When a planter is large enough to warrant a public hearing, elements such as size, spacing, aesthetics, and how it fits into the overall context of the neighborhood are all taken into consideration. Also, for this particular item, weighing an application's appropriateness is more focused on the streetscape than the building. So that's directly from LPC. And we also spoke to the Community Board for Transportation Committee, and they will be reviewing this application. So we, are feeling, of course, we can ask as many questions as we'd like to at this point, but our feeling is that we should really sort of, whatever we decide should be conditional on what that committee says. So is there anyone else who has any questions? I see Lowell, and then Pamela, and then David.
All right, Daniel, could you go back to the picture of the front of your building? See, I have a problem with this picture, and I have a problem with this application because I don't think this picture accurately reflects what the front of this building looks like. There are street vendors in front of this building constantly. You cannot walk down this block without seeing street vendors. And coincidentally, there are none in this picture. And I am concerned that planters of the size we're talking about are either going to eliminate the street vendors who are not here to speak for themselves, or are going to narrow the sidewalk even further with the street vendors and the planters. So I've got an issue with this, and I don't know how we represent the guys who are out there selling fruits and vegetables and whatnot, or whatever else they're selling out there. But these site photographs do not, there's one there, but this entire block is usually covered, and I don't think this accurately reflects what we're looking at.
Pamela?
Want to address that, Daniel, or?
Well, these pictures were taken at different times. I know there are other vendors that come and go here. And they did have the opportunity to join. We posted all the notices along the front of every opening in the building, so they would have seen it, anyone who uses this street for vending. Some of the vendors would be affected because they are actually not set up in a legal location to begin with. They're too close to the entrance of the property. So it is something that we want to keep this street in front of the building to have some consistency, and this will force them to a location where they wouldn't be out of compliance with proximity to the entrance.
So is the reason for putting in these planters to eliminate the street vendors?
The reason that I was given from the owners that asked me to get involved with this was that they wanted it to look better in front of the building.
I'll read between the lines on that one. Thank you.
Thanks, Lowell. Pamela?
Yeah, hi, I'm leaning toward Lowell's opinion here, but I do recognize that it's not always full of street vendors. There are generally more than just the one, the anchor guy that you see in the left side of the left picture. Those that are not licensed, the vendors, do need to pay more attention to staying away from the primary entrance to the space, and I agree with that. The planters, would like to know how much space there is between each planter for pedestrians who may want to step out through there and get clobbered by a bicycle they don't see coming. I'm a little concerned about that because it's directly on the bike lane, which is a very popular bike lane, as we all know. So I see a few hazards. Also, I'm always very much in favor of as much green as we can get anywhere in this city. And I think the Ladies Mile further south from there has benefited hugely from having greenery. planters at the street and also on the islands. It's made a major improvement on 6th Avenue. So my concern again is primarily at the entry of the building that should be, I agree, should be left more open, and also pedestrians stepping through into the bike lane.
So the first, I want to make sure that the planters will be on the sidewalk portion. We're keeping a 1'6" between the edge of the planter and the edge of the curb, with the bike lane being over here. People will have the ability to step around it on the side closer to the building, where we're maintaining, I think, different locations, but 8'10" basically between the planter and the building for the pedestrians to walk. In some cases, even more.
And I see you've left enough space at the entry so that there is a wide
Yes,
opening
you
at
see
the building
we're
entrance.
keeping a 22-foot clear at the entrance, where we showed marked off
Okay,
there.
that doesn't show in the photograph. You can't really tell that in the picture.
From the, I don't think we did a mock-up photograph. This was just an example of what the
Okay,
planter
this
looks
is
like at
somewhere
another
else.
location. That's, yeah, this is just to show you the color of the planter and what the plants are going to look like,
Okay.
and that there's a little
So
reveal at the bottom.
So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 planters. Okay.
Thanks, Pamela. David?
Sure, thank you.
Yeah, actually, Lowell and Pamela kind of beat me to my questions. But I think that the issue of what 715 Fifth Avenue looks like there, that's much different from what you're proposing, where these boxes are just kind of randomly spaced. Can you talk a little bit about that, or what the height of the planting will be? You know, I routinely ride in that bike lane, and I would be concerned about someone who is concealed behind a planter and, say, a shrub suddenly stepping out. Is there going to be visibility sort of through or around these? How tall do you expect them to be? What do you expect to plant in them? And do you have any kind of rendering that shows the length of the block with the planters spaced as they would be, which is kind of random?
So the random placement is really due to all the existing street hardware that's there, the traffic sign, the call box, the parking meter, and originally our plan called for more. DOT told us we couldn't have that many. They wanted to have spacing between everything here. There's a bike rack, all the other signage. So that's why you're seeing a lot less and maybe more haphazard spacing than here at 715 Fifth Avenue, where they just were able to put it straight up and down the block.
It just seems kind of random to me. It doesn't look like a design.
It was the maximum allowed by the regulations that DOT put in. That's how we came to this.
So it was kind of an accidental solution.
We wanted more originally, yes. So this was an accidental solution.
Right. So what
And
kind
then
of plants will you
regarding,
put
the
in, and how tall will the tops of the plants be?
I think it would have been something very similar to this, but if DOT has no regulations on the type of plant, we'd be open to suggestions. I could discuss with ownership if there was something specific, or if you had guidelines on how opaque you wanted it in order for people to see from the other side, from the bike lane.
I think, yeah, I mean, I think that's the suggestion, that it's both ways. If you're stepping from the sidewalk into the bike lane and you can't see what's coming, if you're a biker and somebody's stepping into the bike lane and you can't see them coming, it kind of feels like an accident waiting to happen. Thanks, David. Are you all set?
Yes,
move
until
to
we go
Viren?
around and
Great.
discuss
Yeah.
which direction we want to take.
Here and then Betty.
Yeah, I'm just going to mostly echo everyone's sort of comments, but mainly Lowell's, because I think the sidewalk as it is very tight. So even if you didn't have vendors, it's not wide enough. And then we are proposing to do something that's going to make it even worse. So I am not a great fan of it. I think you should consider some other options. I don't know if that's on the table or not, but maybe tree pits without sort of tree fence, fence around the pits. It might be a way to sort of address some of the issues that have been raised by David and Pamela of visibility from the bike path as well as from the pedestrian's point of view. So then you have trees and then the canopy is further up and higher. But if the intent is to sort of push the vendors away, I think this is not a very good sort of approach to sort of redoing a streetscape. So I think my feeling is that you need to go back to the drawing board, clarify what the intent is and why are we doing what we're doing and what do we want to achieve. And then so the question comes up as to how we can achieve it the best way.
Thanks,
I will
Viren.
also say with regards to tree pits that the requirement is pretty wide for putting in a tree pit now because they want to give it a lot of growth for the roots. So you wouldn't be able to put anything anywhere over here because there's too much stuff. You might be able to fit.
Yeah, but the
one,
city has,
even
just to quickly sort of chip in, city has amazing sort of guidelines when you have the bioswales kind of tree pits and there is actually a cover on it on which you can walk, but it allows the water to flow in. So there are a number of different design solutions that can be actually tried here. And it might give you sort of some beautification ideas, at the same time not compromise the width of the sidewalk in any manner, including the visibility. So I think it's a design problem worth looking into.
Thanks, Viren. Daniel, can I just ask you to hold your comments until we hear from everybody and then you can respond to everybody
Oh,
at
I'm sorry. I
once?
thought it
No,
was
it's
backward.
okay.
Yes.
I appreciate that. Thanks. Betty and then Paul.
Yeah, probably everybody knows that I'm a big fan of green and growing. But when I looked at this, I had serious reservations because I view this as a major shopping area and I've used it many times and walked on that sidewalk and it's very crowded. And I have concern about putting the planters as I think I calculated it. They're basically 4 feet by 4 feet. Is that right? Oh, yeah, I mean, he's not supposed to answer. Anyway, that's what I think this proposal is. So once you put something that's a 4-foot square box, then I would like to know how much free pedestrian space you have to walk on this particular sidewalk, because I look at it as subtracting pedestrian space, not even getting into the vendor issue. And I believe, having consulted the pedestrian mobility plan, that this is considered a sidewalk that needs to have extremely large sidewalks due to congestion. So I think it's really a serious issue. And I think it would be really good if the applicant could, or the owner could think of other solutions that didn't directly impact the pedestrian walkway. I think it's really a definite problem in my sense, because I've found it very crowded.
Betty, can I just follow up with you on that? What do you know what the actual measurement is for what you're describing? Because like for, BLP on a side street, you need 8 feet from a service aisle to the curb. So, and that's a small street. This is the avenue. And we know it's very condensed with pedestrian traffic and all of the lamp posts and post boxes and links and, bike racks. So I'm just wondering, what does it mean when you say it has to be even wider? Do you know what that measurement is?
Extremely large would be like 8th Avenue, 25 feet. And planters are definitely an obstruction to pedestrian flow.
Yeah, because I think Daniel said it was 8 to 10 feet.
What is 8 to 10 feet?
Between the planter and the building.
Between the planter and the building.
Daniel, you can clarify that. Can you clarify that?
Yeah, the minimum width between the planter and the building you can see here is 8'10".
So less than 9 feet.
There it's about 11 feet.
So is that the width of that pedestrians have to walk
Well, the
through?
entire sidewalk is about 16 and a half feet. And we're reducing it down to 8'10" in the smallest area. And then
So
it goes back
that
up.
That's a big,
But that's only for 4 feet. And then after that, it opens up again.
yeah, but when you're walking along the sidewalk, you know, you're walking straight.
It's a traffic
Wouldn't
jam.
go around, and anyway, I've made my point, I think. Thank
Thanks,
you.
Betty. Paul?
I'm kind of concurring with everyone's concerns about pedestrian flow and local vendors and all of that. But we haven't heard much about the preservation aspects, the historic aspects, the historic aesthetics. This is a LPC application in front of the Land Use Committee. And I had sent a note to Carrie and Jessica earlier in the week asking to make sure that transportation was reviewing this for pedestrian flow, accessibility to the street, bike lane impacts. But I was hoping that tonight we'd hear more about what is the aesthetic value of placing 5 sporadic planters in front of the building. Are they aligned with the historic columns of the building? Are they going to accentuate the historic nature of the building? Are they going to bring back something that was once here along this avenue that corresponds to a historic nature? I mean, from the land use perspective and our request about a Landmark Preservation Commission application, I would think that we want to hear more about the landmark and preservation issues and less about pedestrian flow and width of sidewalks, because that will be tackled by transportation. So I'm hoping that, Daniel, you can give us, you haven't mentioned much about why this application is before landmarks and what it is about these planters that is restoring some sort of historic fabric to this block. So if you could address that, I'd appreciate it.
Would you like me to respond now or?
Yes,
or wait?
please.
Okay. Well, we're kind of handcuffed in terms of the look of the planters, in that DOT guidelines told us the color and the size. So this is not, did not give us the ability to match it to anything historic along the building. And I don't think that there's anything historic about the sidewalk through LPC. I could look at the designation photos, but I believe they just had a standard sidewalk to begin with. So there really is not. I understand your question, and I would not say that anything in this application is to bring about any more landmark aesthetics. It was just keep the sidewalk on its own, separate from the building, just making it uniform and having some green area there and hopefully making it look better.
Are there any other committee members who would like to speak on this? Jesse, is there anyone from the public? Oh, Viren?
Yeah, just going
Last
back,
word?
yes. Going back to the to Paul's question, if this is not sort of what do you call it, refurbishing the historical fabric, and if you don't have the information about what used to be there, and if you come back with that sort of information, then it might even be easier, because from that point of view, the way you just presented this, it sounds like that there was nothing there, and now you're putting something else in front of it, and that should be problematic, because the building enjoyed sort of clear views up until now. So I think it's a very important question that Paul raised. I think, yes, all the other questions are hugely important as well. But if this application is about altering the visual sort of nature of that space, of the sidewalk, what is it that we're putting back? And if you're not putting back something and we're introducing something brand new, then this committee can vote that that's not acceptable.
Thanks, Viren. Kit?
I want to chime in quickly on the safety comments around the bike lane. As someone who often uses the bike lane, sometimes with a very young child in the back strapped into a seat so that she's safe. The fact that pedestrians jump out in the middle of a block is problematic. And so I'm all in favor of making sure that when and if planters are installed here and other places, there's good lines of sight. I do think, similar to the vendors needing to be compliant with regulations about where they place their stands, we should also be sensitive to the reality that pedestrians probably are going to need to evolve their behavior as bike lanes become more and more prevalent in the city. And bikers are not doing anything wrong by going up and down them.
Thanks, Kit. Hector?
Yeah, rather than rehash everybody's comments, I'm in agreement with the bottleneck that these planters are going to create. I mean, Trader Joe's is right there, obviously, and I'm sure everybody remembers during the pandemic the lines that were formed out there. I can imagine, God willing, we don't reach epidemic numbers again, but if there was lines out there again, that would even create a greater bottleneck out there. There's no open space, along with the safety issues with the bike lane and everything else. And it's already crowded as it is because Whole Foods, Trader Joe's and the other stores on that block. So, yeah, this has to be really well thought out, and I think the planters are just way too huge to leave a safe, accessible walkway for people, for pedestrians in general.
Great, thanks. I'm just going to go to Miran because he's not spoken yet. Miranal?
Hi, just very quickly. I mean, I just want to echo what Viren said. I'd like to hear more about what are the other options of beautifying the block. This couldn't be the only thing that has been considered.
Great, David, thank you.
Yeah, I think ordinarily, we'd see a presentation that showed the planters in the context of the architecture and how they related, or maybe historic photos of the area that showed how, these were in keeping with what was there historically or honored an idea that was there before. We're not seeing any of that. And I think just in general, in a historic district, when you're introducing something new, the most general thing you can say about it is that it should have sort of a commensurate quality of design. And this is just sort of random planters that are in the spots where they were able to put them because they fit with DOT's requirements. And to me, that's not up to snuff with what you would want in a historic district. So I wouldn't be able to support this.
Thanks, David. Okay, Mike, and then we should probably try to wrap this up.
No, just one final thought. I mean, was any consideration given to just some tree pits along the sidewalk there?
I think Viren asked that very question.
Oh, did he?
Yep. And the answer was, well, we're not sure. There doesn't seem to have been, or it's too complicated because there's no space for the roots to grow out.
Oh, sorry, I was on the phone.
That's okay.
Thanks, bye.
Mike.
All right.
So, Daniel, did you want to say one last thing before I sort of try to summarize?
I'll just say for tree pits that the requirement is very wide. Even if you, I know someone mentioned that they allow you to put in some grading that would allow water to get through. Although I think I've seen DOT say no to that before, but perhaps that is allowed now. But even so, the trees would give you the same problem of, I know 4x4 sounds like it's huge, but it's really not so gigantic, and we'll pick low plants that you'll still have a visual line of sight. If we put multiple trees here, you might have the same issues of blocking people's view and taking up a lot of space and creating trip hazards.
So what I'm hearing is that there's no real design plan as regard to the historic fabric of the neighborhood for these planters. And there is a lot of concern around pedestrian congestion, bike safety, and all the other elements that are already on the street, as well as the street vendors and what the purpose of this plan is. I will say that the application itself is very hard. I think for us, we're really, people who go before LPC are quite thorough in their applications, and it's not just reference photos, but it's sort of mock-ups. And if you do come back to us, it might be worthwhile to look at the application itself and make sure that it's really representational of what we know is out front of Trader Joe's and Michael's, with the planters in place so we can see them, because right now you just have the one drawing with the tiny boxes. And I think it's hard with the measurements to know exactly how wide that sidewalk's going to be. All the questions that you heard tonight. It feels like 8 feet or 9 feet, and even one small spot is, I'm going to guess the transportation is going to have an issue with that. So Paul, I see your hand is raised.
Yeah, Carrie, can you reread the language you read earlier about what LPC said?
Yeah.
In regards to this, because again, we're talking a lot about issues that are not in our purview. And I think if
Sure.
we're going to write a letter, it should be addressed to tackle the LPC issues. And then within our letter, we can defer to transportation on these other conversations.
Here's what it says. When a planter is large enough to warrant a public hearing, elements such as size, spacing, aesthetics, and how it fits into the overall context of the neighborhood are all taken into consideration. Also, for this particular item, weighing an application's appropriateness is more focused on the streetscape than the building. So I actually think what we're discussing
Okay,
is really
thank you. Yeah.
quite relevant. Yeah.
All right, I agree. All right.
And we,
thank
you know,
for that
we were unclear a little bit too as to why was this coming in front of us. So we went and did that research. Yeah. So I do think all of the concerns that everybody has brought up are appropriate for our committee. I know that you will also have to go in front of transportation, and they will be even more focused on congestion and what's happening on that street and what, you know, how wide the sidewalk is, et cetera. So does anybody have a motion that they'd like to make?
So moved the way you described it, Carrie.
So moved, approved, recommended to approve, deny. I don't think I can't make a motion.
Taking into all the concerns expressed by the committee, motion to deny.
I would second that.
So let me just be really clear. It's a motion to deny for the aesthetic historic fabric of the neighborhood. We're not really sure why those planters in those spots, et cetera. The concerns that we have with the sidewalk itself, the amount of space that there is for pedestrian traffic, the vendors, all other things that are on the street already, the lights and the mailboxes and the links, and then also safety of bikers and pedestrians regarding the bike lane and the visibility.
All right, and size and the sort of overall quality of sidewalk.
Okay.
Right, I would lead with the things that you read before, Carrie, that Landmarks expressed as concerns, because they're always happy to say, well, the other things aren't our purview.
I know. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I
It looks like that passes. Thank you so much for coming before us, Daniel. Good luck with transportation, and we really appreciate your time.
Thank you, everybody.
I'm going to turn it over to Jessica for item number 2.
I'm sorry, Jess, before you start, Carrie, are you going to speak with Christine and Dale and let them know what our concerns were before these guys go back to transportation?
We definitely will. I mean, you know, I know Christine's already like, what is this? So I'm not too, but yes, we definitely will.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
I'm also on transportation committee.
Yes, great. Perfect.
I'm sorry, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
We can hear you now. Yep.
Something happened with my camera where my camera's was refusing.
Yes, we can't see you, Jesse. But we
Fantastic.
can hear
Okay,
you.
great, super. I'm here.
Great. Phew. Okay, so as Carrie mentioned at the top, we're switching the agenda slightly. We're going to move Joe up to item number 2. And Joe, thank you for joining us this evening and for your patience. For those who remember at I guess it was it July board?
July.
July board, yep, we looked at and approved the affordable housing plan that the Housing and Health and Human Services Committee has spent a significant amount of time on, and you probably all saw the documents, hundreds of pages of materials that were reflected there, and this really is a tremendous resource, not just for our board, but also for our electeds as they continue to press for more affordable housing in our district. That said, there was the suggestion that given that this may actually come back to us and certainly other committees for review, particularly as it relates to land use items, that it would be helpful for someone from the committee to come and present the Chelsea specific items so that we could be prepared and anticipate these items might be on our docket eventually. And so Joe is going to just walk us through at a very high level. And if we have some time, look at some of the site specific Chelsea sites that we can just, again, all begin learning about. So this is really, some of you, this won't be new, but for many, we're hoping that this is an education and a bit of a primer on these issues. Joe.
Okay, so I did the same presentation for Clinton Health Kitchen land use last week. So I'm understanding how we should roll, and we'll be going through the zoning sections first, and then the site specific sessions. We'll go through each item and take questions or ask any comments about it so you can get clarity. Because in fact, I want to thank the members of that committee. There were 2 of the items that we caught had errors in them, and we fixed them because the committee's eyes were on it. So your eyes should be on this too. I'm going to share the screen and open up the affordable housing plan, but I want to know for background, the plan was first adopted in 2015 and has been amended multiple times since. And it was a response to the then new administration of de Blasio to come up with an affordable housing plan for our district. A lot of the items you'll see on zoning have been in the plan unchanged since 2015. So this section is about the proposed West Chelsea district expansion. And we started looking at this back in 2012, and this whole section came from the Chelsea Land Use Committee at that point in time. And what you have are a number of slides that run through and describe what we asked for and now what's actually happened, so it can bring the committee and the public through the whole process. This is the Chelsea Ymca rezoning was in 2012. We asked for a follow-up study as to why certain areas of West Chelsea were not included in the West Chelsea district, which was established in 2005. And the goal was to create more locations for affordable housing to be built, and within that housing, affordable housing through inclusionary. So in 2013, the Department of City Planning responded saying they would do certain things, but not other things. They wanted to look at frameworks. And the big issues we didn't want hotels west of 11th Avenue. Then in 2014, our board responded and it came up with specific recommendations through the Chelsea Land Use Committee to rezone certain blocks to allow for the expansion and for affordable housing to be built as part of it, with certain additional height and bulk controls that exist in the West Chelsea district. The next thing that happened after a framework was developed for block 675, that's 29th to 30th Streets, 11th to 12th Avenues, a actual zoning proposal from 2 different developers, and originally a third for the entire block was put forth. And those rezonings were gone through a full ULURP and they were adopted in 2021. What happened in those 2 sites, it was rezoned from a manufacturing zone to a this is Stour Lehigh first, and it was specifically to allow more commercial use on Stour Lehigh. I apologize. We also dealt with block 675 as part of this. That's the 29th to 30th, 11th to 12th Avenues, 2 separate rezonings that were handled in different parts of the plan that allowed rezoning from manufacturing to C64, commercial and residential use. And in fact, there are 2 new buildings under construction, one that has just been recently completed, 601 West 29th. This part of the district also allows the use of Hudson River Park development rights and we'll look at that in another section. Right now, we have in front of us 2 areas that have not yet been rezoned. The balance of block 675, which this committee had dealt with recently regarding the Gateway Tunnel and the EMS site, and B, which is the entire block to the south between 28th and 29th, 11th to 12th, and sorry, the 27th to 28th, and that is Con Ed. The last are a series of public uses to the south, right north of Chelsea Waterside Park, the post office vehicle maintenance facility, and the sanitation maintenance facility. And again, we asked for this to be rezoned, this time not to C64, but to C63, 7.5 FAR, consistent with the zoning that exists along West 23rd Street, a lower density. These sites together would produce 442 units of affordable housing. Looking at those sites in broader detail, you're seeing block 670 and a portion of block 671. Again, this would require a combination of use, industrial use, because those are facilities that either support the post office or sanitation, and then being redeveloped as a combination at the base, maintaining those uses, but then new housing above. And in total, this request would bring approximately 1,771 affordable units into Chelsea if these rezonings were done. So I want to stop there, Jessica, and sort of take questions about that section first.
Thank you.
Oh.
Looks like Lowell and then Paul have their hand up.
Joe, for the vehicle maintenance facility, you would propose putting apartments on top of where the trucks are coming in and out?
Yeah, we have a lot of these facilities along the west side. Remember, it was all manufacturing. So you have the Quill bus garage, you have the marshalling yards, all meant to handle lots of trucks and things like that. And the general idea is build above these, orient the truck entrances toward 12th Avenue, the highway, and orient the residential toward 11th Avenue. As part of the Port Authority redevelopment in an area called Galvin Plaza, which is the major entrance to the tunnel, they're proposing to build a new set of ramps over that, and above that, residential on the 10th Avenue side. So this has been very much kicked about for a while as our neighbor keeps on changing. How do you get that? How do you get the public facilities to also provide a housing and affordable housing at the same time?
Right, because the vehicle maintenance facility goes up about 4 stories. There's an entrance on 11th Avenue, and then the exit is actually onto 24th Street, close to 12th Avenue, but it goes up about 4 stories. There's a ramp in there. I'm not sure that building on top of that, you're starting from, a sky lobby 6 stories in the air, like a office building already.
That's exactly what the Port Authority is proposing to do on 10th Avenue between 40th and 41st Streets.
Right.
You would have an entrance at grade and then take a series of elevators, just like in the rail yards, elevators up to about the 6th or 7th story. And that's where the lobbies would be above. The same thing for the new Port Authority, one of the parts of the new Port Authority terminal on 9th Avenue. There's a mixed commercial, there's a commercial building proposed. The board's asked for it to be mixed residential and commercial. That would start, Lowell, about 8 stories above the terminal, where the terminal ends up. So that's like the general gestalt of this whole idea.
Yeah, I'm just worried about air quality in those apartments, because you basically have, the postal trucks coming in and out of there all the time. And I don't think they're electric trucks at this point.
I'm giving the idea that by the time anything here gets settled, it's going to be all electric.
Okay, fair enough. Thanks, Joe.
Paul?
Thanks, Joe. This is great. I appreciate doing this with us too. I was at the Hell's Kitchen land use one. It was very helpful. I have a question, but I want to follow up on Lowell's comment. And I think part of the issue here is not necessarily that we're going to build on top of the existing structures, but we're going to put zoning into place on these blocks that if these buildings were
redeveloped
down, then we'd have a minimum FAR of 2 industrial and then residential on top of it. So it's not necessarily that these buildings will remain with something built on top of them. So it's thinking of it from a zoning perspective and land use perspective, that this whole area may change dramatically, but we want to include some sort of residential component. So think of it, I'm thinking of it from that perspective as well.
Right. It really posits that what Paul said, there would be a redevelopment of the site, some private developer in partnership with the post office, in partnership with the sanitation department, would actually rebuild the site to fit purpose-built 2 FAR for the industrial use and then residential above.
But my question, Joe, is on block 675 on the Douglaston and Lawless area and developments. Did we meet that goal of how, because I think you said you wanted, on that chart, it says 369 affordable units. What number did we end up getting at 675? Do you recall?
I can go back and it's in the presentation. I can find it for you, sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's nice to highlight that we actually hit that. I think we hit that goal. So
I think we exceeded it. So
that's, you know, because we've had this plan in place for so long that when that proposal came to us, we kind of knew what we were looking for at that site. So with the transfer of development rights and the rezoning and the zoning text amendments, all of that came into play. In the backs of our minds was a housing plan to get a certain number of affordable units. And I think that echoes why we're going through this presentation tonight. Thank you.
Bert?
Yeah, Joe, I want to thank you. This is, I like the walkthrough. It makes it more understandable for me. And those two particular sites, I like what you said, Paul, because we're not necessarily talking about building on top. Like that sanitation garage, I still use the word garage. It's not that highly used if you look at it. I mean, it's used, but it's not like trucks lined up to go in and come out and lots of activity there. And the post office, if I remember correctly, I think I am, the post office itself, at least 10 years ago, had proposed building apartments on top.
That was the Morgan Annex, not this site.
No, this one.
Oh, this one too? Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
this one. It, you know, they just may have thrown it out for a couple of months to see who would bite, what would happen. But they themselves had proposed it. And again, you know, they may decide, because there had been a big fight in Congress about the new vehicle for the postal system. And they originally were going to do gasoline, and now they've been forced to reevaluate that. And I think their goal now is electric. All the new vehicles will be electric, which will affect this facility. But I like the idea of the possibility. Maybe we'll decide we don't need it. We'll tear it down and we'll just start from scratch, and we have apartment houses. Thank you.
Excuse me, we'll go to Marty and then Kit, and I have a question. And I think then Joe, it sounded like you had more you wanted to do. Is that right?
Yeah. Is there,
Okay,
but on this section, anything else on this section?
Marty, you're Kit? Yeah.
I wanted to go back to the comment that Joe made about anticipating it all being electric. And that may or may not be the case. It may or may be hydrogen, some other non-emitting technology. My concern is air for residents. And at some point, timing is going to matter. Somewhere it has to be that no matter what the technology is in use, the air that the residents will face will be acceptable. And that might mean some kind of scrubbers, pollution cleaners, if this comes to fruition before electric is as widespread as we all hope it to be.
Thank you, Marty. I just want to remind us all that we're, you know, hopefully these things will happen sooner rather than later, but these will all be things that all of our committees will have the time, you know, the appropriate time to reflect on and opine on given the moment and the proposal that's before us. Kit?
Thanks, Jessica, and thanks for the presentation, Joe. My question is, have we asked recently sanitation and Postal Service whether they intend to continue using these facilities in the way that they've historically been used?
We asked them a number of years ago, and the answer was, you know, yes, of course, because what you hear is every agency says we're going to use everything. So like
Yeah.
the block to the north between 27th and 28th, Con Ed said, we're always going to use that. And then we heard through the grapevine, a lot of real estate folks talking to Con Ed about purchasing part of that block. So I think one of the things we've learned over the years is agencies or large entities say we need everything, but when the money comes, they find out ways to do it differently. And I guess the biggest example of that, of course, is like let's say the tow pound that was impossible to move, but when the legislation changed for the park, the tow pound got moved. So I think we should always remember, put our stake in the ground going forward. So when the change happens, we're at least positioned to respond to it.
Yeah, I think that's maybe where I was going with my question. Let's say hypothetically, the Postal Service looks at their bank account and wants to sell. I mean, what does that mean in terms of the way that it's zoned? That anyone could use it for an industrial use?
No, it's anyone use it for commercial use, but the FAR is very low. It's an FAR of 2. Any private developer buying the site would seek to rezone. And the more we give some framework or intent as to what we would accept, that helps the whole discussion going forward.
Gotcha. Okay. That's cool.
Pamela?
So we should all remember there's no such thing as never. There's no such thing as always. There's no such thing as impossible. Okay. I'm interested in this site, but I'm comforted by the fact that whatever gets built there is north of the park and therefore will not be casting nasty shadows on the greenery. But I'm curious to know, this is in a flood zone. So in new construction, would there be requirements to have the mechanicals way above ground and in a void maybe somewhere? How tall realistically will they be able to build?
So the building is in the resiliency zone. So all those things must be above the ground floor. And that's one of the reasons we noted in this Pam, putting height limits and slender buildings with the riverfront site. So anything else we wanted to add in all these things we've said, it would be in this West Chelsea Special District. So we should think about any additional refinements that the committee could suggest for future changes in the plan. So we can note that down. So I guess the point is bulky is better than height and slender is better than heavy footprint, right?
Okay. Thanks.
Mirna?
Yeah, I apologize if this is obvious to everyone, but I just want a clarification. Where do we come up with this 30% affordability number from? Is that right?
We started working with that in 2004 and 5 when Hudson Yards and West Chelsea rezonings happened. And slowly but surely, the city has moved from a 20% affordability toward a 25 and 30% affordability. So we were ahead of the curve on that by adopting it way back when, and it's adopted more and more. A lot of times you have 20% affordability and another 5% at a higher income band. The mandatory inclusionary housing calls for 25%. So we've been able to negotiate higher site by site sometimes.
But if this is prescriptive, is it possible to maybe propose an even higher number, or is that?
I think part of it is these kind of affordability deals mostly are done through cross subsidy. You must have a high enough market rent in order to get the lower affordable rent in these cases. So that currently is the current thinking on it. And I think if we can say 30, knowing that some of them come out of 25, we again kind of get them toward this, as long as the high real estate values continue, Myrtle. If the real estate values drop, you can't do this, at every location.
Thanks, sure.
Aaron, and then I'd like to suggest we move to the second part.
Just a very quick question, Joe. You might have already covered it. The TDR, the transfer of development rights, are they tied to the blocks? In other words, if the Postal Service or anybody else chooses to transfer the rights, is that something that sort of our proposal is going to preclude that, or is something that we have no control over?
So the post office cannot move its development rights. However, the Hudson River Park Trust can, and that is here in the next section, which we'll go through very quickly. And there's a few sites in Chelsea. So this whole issue here, one block upland, meaning from 12th Avenue over to 11th, HRPT can transfer unused development rights from anywhere in the park to a site through a whole special permit process. And we've looked at two of those, Block 675, the Lazarian deal and the Douglaston deal. So you can see we did this here, and 234 affordable units came out of that. And the park got 37 million plus an additional 3 million, so that's 40. And then we did the Lazarian, the park got 11.2 million, and then we negotiated an additional 1 million. That's 55 affordable units there. So as the rest of these happen, this is the Georgetown site, the balance of block 675. That's eligible, Viren, for that special permit if the developer chooses. The Con Ed site is eligible also. And then the other ones are further north. The one north of the post office site there, we felt that it should not go to an FAR of 12 because it's right opposite the park. That should be lower, more consistent with the 23rd Street corridor, which is currently a 7.5 FAR. That was the underlying thinking, the underlying planning thinking.
Okay, all right. So there's no mechanism to sort of lock it to the site. So, use it or lose it. That sort of scenario does not, we don't have any mechanism to sort of make that happen. Am I right?
There's no mechanism to move anything off the post office site whatsoever. No.
Okay, got it. All right, and the last quick question is, it probably might not be sort of the right place for it, but since we've been talking about sort of sustainability and resilience, in terms of materiality, a lot of new stuff that's sort of being discussed with decarbonization at DCP, like timber construction and whatnot. Is that something that we get into at this point, or we don't?
Well, all the new local laws for decarbonization are going to apply to every single new development happening, period. And the phase-in is happening much faster than most people realize. So it's also being looked at retrofitting older buildings, and the square footage has shrunk as to what the targets are. Affordable housing, some is subject, some is not. So these things are something that I think both land use committees should look at in general, because they are now going into effect.
Yes.
And let's all knock on wood that we get there, but at least they're starting.
Thank you.
Jessica, can I move to the next two sections?
Please.
Okay. So the next one in Chelsea is the Morgan Post Office. And this has been in the plan since 2015. For those of you who don't know, the Morgan Annex is the block south of the major Morgan building between 27th and 28th Streets. That block was full of housing. It was demolished. The Hudson Guild was on that block at one point, originally demolished, right? So we're looking at a location where there was a negotiation more than 30 years ago or 35 years ago with the post office. And in fact, there are foundations put into that building and steel columns to carry housing above. It has never been built. So we found that site, went back to those documents, and the proposal is to build, it's a roughly 40,000 square foot lot where the columns on this block are from 10th Avenue, from 9th Avenue over west. And that would, in calculation, result in roughly 157 affordable apartments. And it is currently zoned M15 and FAR 5. We propose to produce it, to change it to an FAR of 12, adjacent to the high density Hudson Yards zone. Questions or thoughts on this?
Joe, can you just speak to the process of what makes this move from proposed to active?
Yeah. One thing is that some agency may come forth and say, we want to do a development. And in fact, about 15 years ago, the post office came forth and put out an RFP to do development. And they considered something. And so all of a sudden we were like caught with our pants down, the community board. How do we respond to this? What do we do? So now that we have something here, we can at least say, if there's going to be development, here's how we'd like you to do it. Don't propose to go to an FAR 14 or 18, because this is a block stepping down toward the less dense portions of Chelsea from Hudson Yards. So that's how we respond when things come out. Yes.
Mike, you have a question about this?
Yeah, Joe, when we first looked at this, it was prior to the post office doing work on this building, right?
No, they're doing work on the building to the north.
Oh, to the north.
Yeah, this is the Morgan Annex, not the Morgan, right? So
okay.
And that actually has been leased to Tishman Spire, and they're converting it to a major commercial building.
Exactly. Okay, that clarifies that. Thank you, Joe.
This one with the supermarket on the ground floor.
Exactly, exactly.
Betty?
Joe, has there been any discussion or gossip or anything about the future use of this building? Has anybody talked about it at all?
I have not heard about it, Betty, but I do know the post office remains in financial difficulty. And the volume of mail itself, remember, this was a mail sorting facility, not packages kind of thing, has gone down dramatically. So I think this is a site that will be looked at as the rest of the neighborhood develops around it, because it's so adjacent to the high density in Hudson Yards.
Yeah. What would you estimate the height would be?
We just have it at a FAR of 12. I think probably this would come out with a 45-story building, approximately.
Yeah, so I guess we could, if that's the case, that Penn South will probably fuss a lot about it, but that's in the future.
Right. Well, and again, Penn South, like Elliott Chelsea to the south, is all connected here to say, what should this be? And at least we're putting some marker in the ground saying, if you're going to build, you must have some affordability.
So is this is another 30%?
Yes. And if you remember, also, Betty, it's only on a portion of the site. The columns to carry a new building don't go the full depth to 10th Avenue. It's just 200 by 200.
It would be useful maybe if you developed a little diagram showing that, not now necessarily, but at some point. That's a very good point, that it's not the whole building. That would be useful. Thank you.
Good. Anything else on this? Anyone? Okay, then our next one, sorry, is, hold on a second. Bayview. Again, Bayview has been in the plan since 2015, and it was originally noted as affordable, as supportive housing. And we had a lengthy discussion at the Housing and Health and Human Services Committee that this is maybe a possibility to do a hybrid housing development, a combination of supportive housing, but also housing for those individuals who have mental illness, who need a greater degree of services, social and mental health services, than the standard supportive housing can offer. And we talked about this and looked at it, and concurrent with the committee's consideration of this, the state, through the redevelopment of Penn Station, has noted in a press release that this site will be for affordable housing. So it's a good example where, as we were figuring out how to propose or what to do as a board and a community, the state began to act, and now this begins to position us. So I'm going to ask very much that an ongoing discussion happens at Chelsea Land Use, along with the broader community and Housing, Health and Human Services, about what kind of model proposal could be developed here to serve multiple social service homeless populations. For people's memory, this is the old Siemens Ymca. It is a building that is shaped in a way that allows lots of smaller units to be built. And there are some great resources there in the building, which we, in our last go around, as the building being redeveloped by the state, through an RFP for a group called the Women's Group, right? I got that name right, Betty?
Yes, it's not quite that.
The women's building,
Women's building.
The things that we took a lot of tours, housing, Chelsea Land Use, and that the things we want to preserve here are, there is a huge pool. It was a YMCA. There's a large gym with a basketball court, and there's a large industrial kitchen. All those things with any kind of affordable housing or facility built should be retained for the community's use. So that's roughly 33,000 square feet. That's a lot there that could be used for communities use.
And sorry to interrupt, Joe, just briefly, just so everyone else on the committee knows, we're actually going to be discussing this site as new business related to some work that had been done that we're concerned about from a preservation standpoint. So we'll be talking about 550 West 20th in just a little bit. It looks like Kit, did you have a question on this property in particular?
Yeah, thanks, Jessica. Joe, remind me, when we came up with our framework for where we would cite different types of affordable housing, including supportive housing, and in this case, you're talking about supportive housing for individuals who need a higher level of services and care. How did proximity to schools and playgrounds play into decision making?
Yeah, we actually, it was not for affordable housing. We did our maps. We did them for social services. And the idea is that we had these concentric circles that you don't want to cluster too much at one location. So I can certainly get those maps out, send them to Jessica and Carrie. You can look at them because we spent a lot of time on that, on how this would work to make sure we're not concentrating social services, depending upon what kind of facility we're talking about. And they're all noted there, Kit, like the school, to this, to that. We mapped it all out. So I'll get those maps to you guys.
Do those maps include like private schools? Because just, I know that Chelsea Piers has a daycare. It has significant after school and summer programming for kids. I wonder if those actually made it into the way that we thought about.
What I like to do is send you guys the maps and then get information that we're missing back, and I'll get them revised, because the maps are always a ongoing process.
Sure. Yeah, no, and Guardian Angel is a parochial school that's right there. Because all for this use of this space, just not super confident that individuals needing the highest level of care is the exact best spot.
Betty, you had a question?
No, I think I wanted to ask or comment that there's also the roof. There's a huge roof area that can be used for different possibilities. That's it.
Emma?
The same question applies here about the mechanicals. In the flood that shut that building down and got it evacuated, the boilers went under and stayed under, and that's a whole issue about the floodplain and raising the mechanicals into the building somehow. What effect does that have?
All mechanicals will have to be off the ground floor entirely. But additionally, Pam, because if it's renovated under the new rules and regulations for carbon, you would not be able to put in a gas boiler, for example. You'd have to go all electric, which means it's a whole different system and where these things go. So, for example, just from my own professional experience, I'm in the middle of, I have a building on 17th and 10th. I'm in the middle of putting a waterproof room with a submarine door around the electrical room, because that's in the floodplain and actually that cellar flooded. So these kinds of things, which we thought were maybe would happen in the future, are happening in today. So anything like that had to be fully resilient, otherwise it couldn't be built.
It just seems to me that moving those mechanicals up to grade even eats up a lot of the square footage that's available for other uses in the building. It really cuts down on it. There will be a lot of pressure to do things like getting rid of the gym or the cafeteria or the chapel or the pool for that matter.
We did these calcs, Pam, with that in mind, and took out square footage already.
Thanks.
And I think, and that's the last slide in this. And please note that we did note the building's landmark eligible, and we have all these original architectural details that should be preserved in any kind of project that happens here. Jessica or Carrie, any questions from you guys?
I think you're just obviously hearing, as you would imagine from any committee, lots of opportunity and concerns alike, and the opportunity that should any of these find traction, which I think we would all be excited for, because underutilized space at any level, whether that's air or in Bayview's case, an empty building, is certainly not serving any of us well. So I just think that as early and often as we can be engaged in these conversations and or helpful, right? And so in particular for things that seems like Bayview has found a course, at least right now, with result of the Penn Station redesign, but certainly with the Morgan Annex and anything else, if there's an opportunity for us to have discussions with electeds or facilitate opportunities for development at the public or private level with these pieces in mind, I think this committee would be eager to participate in those discussions.
Great.
Is there anything we can do to help advance that and or be prepared should things move forward?
Well, one of the things I've been thinking about since the last committee meeting and this one, maybe the board over the next year should be seeking to meet with some of these large institutional players like the post office, like Con Ed, to say, let's discuss the future of this X, Y, or Z. Because although you say Con Ed, you need that entire block for everything, you probably don't, and you're going to come one day for rezoning. So just sort of being a little more proactive as we're moving ahead, but just with the large players, because I think those are the ones that are most interested, and we'll talk to our board.
I think that sounds great. Paul, you have a question?
Yeah, thanks, Jessica. Joe, one other thing that is not part of the housing plan necessarily, but could you give us a minute or two on the Highline development rights and the funding of the Chelsea Housing Fund, and how does that integrate at all into this housing plan, or where do those dollars get spent from the housing fund or anything along those lines?
Yeah, the only once the Highline development rights were 90% used, there was a section of the zoning that invoked that said you could alternatively contribute to the Affordable Housing Fund in Chelsea. And the only developer that has taken advantage of it so far, for a very odd reason, has been the related companies. If you remember, there's a legal demolition at 500 West 28th Street. We went by one day, Betty and I in a cab, I think. We looked back and we saw the building was gone. And then had a whole series of meetings with HPD in which we found out that HPD and DOB basically issued permits to demolish an occupied building. Tenants were vacated, and it's a vacant site. Most interestingly, that was done in order to transfer the development rights from 500 West 28th Street lot to the Zaha Hadid building that Related developed. So therefore, they did a legal demolition and benefited by transferring development rights to an incredible high-end market rate condo. As a way to fix this, a series of meetings with HPD and DOB, and it was agreed that Related would rebuild 500 West 28th Street, and 4 of the 6 apartments would be permanently affordable as a penalty for the illegal demolition. But to do that, they had to buy development rights from somewhere because they used them up in the condo to the west, and they bought Highline development rights. And that's roughly, Paul, I think 2 million or 1.9 million sitting in that fund. And it is waiting for, as always, a place in Chelsea to hit to be useful. When the development of 201 7th Avenue was brought up and there was a shortfall, the board did propose to allow Highline development rights to be used there to bridge that. It was not taken up, and in fact, that money still sits in place. That fund can be used anywhere in Community District 4, and I would expect in the next few years, as other affordable housing developments finally move ahead, there will be some desire to use Highline development rights to subsidize other developments down. But that's the sole use and the sole transaction to date. I can get you the exact numbers and I'll write it up and have it sent to Jessica and Carrie.
No, I just remember we had a lengthy fight with CPC on the pricing of those development rights, and we, argued. Chelsea Land Use argued pretty aggressively to raise those prices, but nothing.
And we succeeded. We got the prices.
Oh yeah, we did.
We got the city was basically selling they proposed giving them away like a fire sale. It was unbelievable, less than the market was, and we got something much higher. So
yeah, it was like the market was 1,000. They were pricing at 200, and we got somewhere between 400 and 600.
Yep.
I'd have to look up the numbers again, but that was.
I'll write it up and get it to you.
That's awesome. Thanks, Joe. Appreciate it. This is great.
Anything else?
Okay. No, we appreciate you doing double duty at a committee meeting tonight, and to be continued in terms of our ongoing engagement.
And I guess we're going to be working together on Bayview because that's coming up soon. So we want to get in there early and often, as opposed to being told what should happen there.
Yes. Thank you, Joe.
Thanks a lot, Carrie. Thanks, Jessica. Thanks, everybody.
Have a great night. Okay. Carrie, to you for LPC checklist.
Yes, first, I guess it's the night of technical difficulties. I've had my camera off and I'll probably put it off again because the lights above my head are strobing. My husband's arms keep coming into frame, trying to fix them, but I don't want to bother anyone as my own eyes are going like this. So I apologize if I'm looking funny. Item agenda number 3 is the LPC, CLU LPC checklist. So first of all, thank you everybody who participated and contributed over the summer. We took all of your comments and advice and added that to the checklist. As we discussed in July, we were going to send Clinton Hell's Kitchen Land Use a final draft to see, if they had any issues and comments and wanted us to incorporate anything that was particular to that neighborhood. We got that feedback on Friday night, so we did not have time to add their comments into our draft. I think, unfortunately, they took it as a first draft instead of a final draft. So there were a lot of comments, and we need a little bit more time to address those. They also had a request that we do a working group on this, but well, Jessica and I don't feel like that's necessarily necessary for the comments that are made. We can incorporate them and work, just via email or have one meeting. And if anybody's interested in attending that meeting, please let us know, because we'll be reaching out to them to have, one sort of final meeting on their comments, address them. And, there's nothing super surprising. We obviously get the bulk of these kinds of applications. So it's interesting to hear, some of the things that we have added that, have come up over the last month and a half are Christine or the sanitation report we've put in to ask, make sure that developers have read it and they are complying to the best that they can. We can't force them to, but we would like them to, at least have read the document. We've included some questions on like what we saw happen on, I think it was West 20th, correct me if I'm wrong, David, where there was a tenant in a building that they wanted to redevelop. So we want to make sure that we're capturing all of the housing issues that are, potentially happening with these redevelopments. So we've added a few questions about that. You're not seeing that yet because those are in the works. And we're going to request that we table the vote until next month so we can meet with them, capture everything that, all of their concerns, and then vote. I really would not, I do not want to, we would really like to not have this go longer than that before we make this happen. It's a living document. It will change over time. It's not meant to be something set in stone. So we can always add or take away things as they come. So just, that's kind of that. If anybody has anything they want to add right now, we're happy to hear it. But otherwise, this will be back on the agenda next month. Great. Moving on to item number 4. Sorry, that was very long-winded. I apologize.
Great. The next item is the statement of district needs and budget requests. For those who might be newer, this is an opportunity. Every committee has the opportunity to put forward suggestions that will be presented in Community Board 4's capital and expense budget requests for the next fiscal year. So fiscal year beginning, we're talking about 24. So talking about July 1st, 2023 through June 30th, 2024. The items that are in the Dropbox reflect our overall statement of district needs, which doesn't have a specific land use section to it. But if anybody has any particular edits or suggestions that they want to see made, I would encourage, it's a very helpful document to just be familiar with. So if you have any proposed suggestions there, but then very specifically, we have an opportunity, as I mentioned, to suggest any budgetary requests. Well, typically, Chelsea Land Use, I think actually both land use committees have a modest number of financial requests. Last year, I believe we had 4 in total. Jesse, I can share, I have them up if I can share my screen, or can you pull them up?
You can definitely share your screen. I can pull them up too if you like, whichever one.
Okay, I'll pull them up, and let's hope I'm not sharing my whole life on my computer right now. Oops. Okay, oops, you don't want to see that.
You see that?
Okay, can you guys see that?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay.
You can even zoom in more if you wanted.
I'm sorry?
You could zoom in more if you wanted, but yeah, that's fine.
Okay, great. I will, let's do 150. How's that? Good. Okay. So these are the 4 Chelsea land use specific requests that were put in the budget last year. Fund and prioritize the updating of DOB website so as to flag and notify building owner and the agency when an improper demolition permit has been requested for a residential multiple dwelling within a special district. And then a little bit of rationale. It says the agency will accommodate this issue within existing resources. We can decide collectively, sorry, a word about timing. We'll have the opportunity, the budget task force is really meeting to finalize recommendations in October. So we'll have an opportunity to revisit these if there are any ongoing concerns or things we need to explore more between now and the budget task force meeting. If we feel that this is not being done within our desired, like in the desired amount, then we can continue to leave this in as an ongoing request. I'll quickly go through them all. The second was expand community boards other than OTPS funding to include additional 40,000 per board. Jesse, I believe this is what you were reminding me of, that is sort of become in land use because we've used it to secure funds for studies that have specifically impacted the West or hope to impact the West Chelsea Historic District. Is that correct?
Yeah, I believe so. David, you could confirm with me whether that was sort of the idea behind this. Was that the funds that were originally put into the community board's budget back in 2019 and 20 were some portions of that fund were dedicated to a study of the Hell's Kitchen Historic District. And so we thought if there was a desire to do a similar study, which does cost money because you need to hire a professional preservationist who has the understanding of what LPC would like to see and everything, and do the research, that was this idea. So
that's correct.
Yep.
Great. So in effect, we'd be requesting this again for FY24.
Yeah.
The third item was fund homeowner flood proofing measures as part of flood resiliency. Pamela asked a number of questions tonight. We know that this directly impacts our district. Here it is said further study by the agency is needed, and we can ask that they continue, revisit this request based on hopefully what was their continued study. If it's something we also want to take up separately as an ongoing issue, certainly we could do that as other board business or other committee business. Lastly is study the effect of open restaurants text amendment on neighborhood character, noise, ADA accessibility. Currently the new text amendment removes references to sidewalk cafes from the zoning, and the DOT will take over the administration of this program. As far as I've seen, a lot of this continues to be very much in flux with this administration, but would welcome any feedback about any of these 4 items that anybody may have. Before I turn to that, I just want to note that we can then have a discussion about any additional items that we'd like to see added based on what this committee has reviewed and discussed over the last year, right? Anything that goes into our budget request should be something we've very specifically written a letter on and have been on record for. And if there's any suggestions that don't meet that, we can use that as an opportunity to reshape our agenda for the coming months to make sure that this time next year, we can be more affirmative in including those requests as part of our budget. So any comments about any of the 4 suggestions here before we move, or the 4 previous submissions before we move on to suggestions for this year? Bert?
Yeah, of these 4 items, when I'm looking at this chart, only one did we get a result. We have the $257,000 for each community board. We had asked for, what was it, 40,000. But we got 257,000. The other 3, this request requires further study, blah, blah, blah. You know, has anything happened subsequent to this? I assume these are responses we got maybe a year ago. Has anything happened since then? Or it's still blah, 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 we have to study this further?
My sense is that it's that there is not substantial progress, but Jesse, is there anything you're familiar with on any of these items?
No,
I mean, relevant?
Yeah, I mean, no, the DOB website request is, you know, something we've been flagging for a while. You know, DOB they're transitioning from their building information system to DOB Now. And so I will say we are still very low on the totem pole for this request. There are much bigger ticket items that they are focusing on in terms of updating the websites. And then just to be clear, the response to the community board budget question, that is our total budget, including salaries. So it is not as though we asked for 40,000 and they gave us 250,000. They are simply just stating they are simply just stating what our overall total budget is. So if you take my salary, Nellie, and Janine's out of that, it's a very small amount of money. And then the third one, no, I don't have any. I mean, we can certainly follow up DCP, but when they say further study, that Jessica's right, it usually means that that just means that it's they haven't done anything on it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, are there, as reflecting on the year, are there suggestions that people have for budget requests they'd like to see incorporated for this year? Carrie.
Sorry, I'm just getting to my notes. Yes. I would like to request that DSNY and DCAS fund the repair of the leaking roof of former colored school number 4, 128 West 17th.
Great, we're seeing some nodding heads.
Nice and straightforward. I think that, we often also speak about trying to fund additional staff for LPC because we have these applications that have been outstanding for years. We will speak about one later in a minute, 9 years for landmarking. And often the reason stated is that they just don't have the staff to get it done. So I guess I'm not sure who does that go to? The city for LPC for staff?
LPC.
LPC.
Yeah, we've done that request in the past, so we certainly can reinstate it. And I think tell me if I'm wrong, Paul, might have come up at the other land use committee just because they've got similar land use, particular
backlog.
Yeah, there's particular items that they've been working on very hard.
Yeah.
St. Patrick the Moors Church, certainly one of them, and then the Hell's Kitchen Historic District. And so I could see that being a combined effort by both committees.
And Patty's Market.
And Patty's Market.
And the third thing that I'm interested in is Department of Buildings to fund inspectors to investigate structural stability of historic and landmark buildings before the work begins. And that is coming straight from, 9th Avenue and 14th Street and what happened, the debacle there, that we need to be really making sure that these buildings that are then, that are supposedly not structurally stable, and then we find out maybe we're structurally stable, but they're, torn down and we lose those buildings, that we should have, DOB should have more funding for those inspectors.
Carrie, can I add to that we not just say historic districts, but special districts?
Sure. Yes.
Thanks.
That's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie. Anyone else have anything they'd like to add? Hector.
Yeah, I don't know if this is appropriate for the budget, but I'd like to see a little bit more increase in visibility of school safety officers, because we've been having issues with some of the schools nearby in the neighborhood, going into buildings, not just in housing, but in all sorts of buildings in the neighborhood near the schools. And apparently the school safety officers are just, I don't know, they're isolated at the building, but they don't go out. I don't know if that's even feasible.
Hector, we have Kit here. I'd like to suggest that go for ACEs. That feels appropriate for that committee to reflect on, and then can, just knowing that I'm also at the budget task force, we can then review those requests accordingly.
Yeah, because it's becoming it's becoming a real issue. We're getting seniors that are being terrorized literally in their own homes. They're afraid to go out during the day because the kids are kind of acting like animals, unfortunately. Some of the kids, very, very poor behavior. So, and a lot of fights have broken out.
Kit, you're good with you guys as you consider budget requests or that discussion, that work scope, that'll go to ACEs?
Hector, maybe it makes sense for you and I just to discuss offline what you're seeing and what your concerns are. I'm not super confident it makes sense for ACEs, but perhaps if you and I could talk about what you have in mind. School resource officers specifically are assigned to the schools, not to residential properties or commercial properties. It's just not what they do. But maybe with Jesse's counsel, we can figure out what is the appropriate way to address what you're bringing up.
Yes.
Happy to do that.
So Hector, I would also, I'd like, how is that a land use issue? And if we can figure out a way that it may be a land use issue, then we can, consider that, kind of like we did with the open restaurants. It wasn't necessarily in our purview, but we wrote it such that, it could be. So maybe that's just something to think about and bring back in October.
Can I suggest maybe Hector as well, but Kit maybe talk to housing, because I think that is a housing, that could be considered more of a housing concern as well as along with education. So that might be the route to take.
Okay, well,
thank you, Hector. Darren?
Yeah, I'm just going to take it back to the LPC. Maybe this is not exactly, we had to figure this out collectively. We talk about the historic fabric of buildings and preservation, but more often than not, we forget that there's a larger city fabric that is also at stake. And the 9th Avenue example sort of brings that point home, because when people combine these smaller lots in a historical block and then look for extra FAR to build a taller building at the back, and in the process, we kind of compromise the quality of landmark buildings, or in that particular case, we practically destroyed them. So how do we just the way DOB permits and LPC is what is being we're asking them to coordinate their efforts. I think DCP needs to be brought on board as well, as to how do we preserve the historic fabric of particular blocks that have been occupied by a major number of landmark buildings, for example. So I don't know exactly what I'm asking for, but is there a kind of a study? Is there some sort of funding that we can request, and we can look at Chelsea Historic District and identify those kind of blocks and lots and create a kind of database and propose that to LPC and DCP? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder if we should be spending some time on that as a block of work, and from that, understand what we think is really needed. Is it a study? Is it simply some meetings? And then from there, we can determine if there's a budget request to be had. But it feels it feels worthy of digging in, but that we don't know what it is we're asking for yet.
Yeah, we know what we're asking for. We just don't know how to sort of make it fit in the budget request.
So what do you think we'd be asking for, Viren? Because I will say that honestly, just going to the LPC meetings to read our letters into testimony, it's an issue all over the city. It's not just us. Like everybody is fighting back against these, combining of townhouses, and LPC kind of shrugs and says, it's not in our purview, or it's not, that's sort of the favorite line, like, oh, we can't say what, something should be used for. We could only say, what color the brick should be. Sorry.
Yeah, it goes back to
but it's really, so like, what do you think we would say? Because I think it really is a concern, and it's a housing concern, and it's a community concern. And I heard testimony from a community board in Soho last week where the city council member was testifying that a moving of a window was going to be really terrible for a residential building, because the subway exit would come right up in front of the door, and LPC approved it because it's how something is used is not their concern. So really question of what would we be asking for? Because I think it's very legitimate, and it's really widespread concern.
No, I think we can brainstorm on this, but LPC doesn't have the jurisdiction to expand its own jurisdiction. We understand that. Right. DCP doesn't have that too, and DOB doesn't have it, but city charter does. So I don't know if it goes to city council for consideration, because DCP, all the three agencies need to sort of get together and find a way of changing the charter so that a larger sort of urban fabric, historic fabric of blocks and lots is also preserved, not like a blanket statement, but in particular cases where it really matters, like it did at 9th Avenue location.
Right. Well, maybe we can offline try to figure out what the wording of that is, and who we're asking.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Paul?
Hi. I'm sorry I didn't dig into this a little bit deeper to prepare for this, but I seem to recall that we, in previous years, I thought it was last year, had a lot of requests for NYCHA capital improvements, elevators and things like that. And so I'd ask probably Hector and Mike and maybe Betty to look into whether those budget items were met. And if not, maybe we should reinstate them.
I'll just share, Paul, that housing has like at the housing meeting, they reflect on those same requests. I think, Hector, you were in the meeting with us last week where we did that. And some of them are moving forward, and where they're not, they've continued to be elevated.
Okay. I thought it came out of this committee at one point too. So thank you for making sure that stuff gets addressed.
The good or bad news is they're still on the list. where they need to be on the list, they're on there.
They shouldn't be on the list. They should be done.
Unfortunately, just FYI to everybody, to my chagrin, because the redevelopment is going to be happening hopefully next year, there's been a slowdown in a lot of NYCHA repairs and response times. So it's and that's reflected on some of these elevator repairs moving forward and other main projects that are supposed to be put forth. So it almost seems like a stalling tactic on NYCHA's part. I don't know if that's the actual case, but yeah, it's been slow going with a lot of the stuff that's been happening.
Thank you for that context, Hector. Dave.
Going back to what Viren was talking about, we have talked in the past about the possibility of a zoning text amendment that would reduce the FAR in row house areas, like within historic districts. I know that Brooklyn Heights, for example, has a lower FAR in its row house districts than Chelsea does. And I think that that could be a way to get around landmarks always saying, well, you know, that's not our purview. In a way, it is a zoning issue. You know, we wouldn't be getting these proposals for huge, both rooftop and rear additions that subsume the original house, which landmarks won't push back very hard against. So it could be a way of controlling that. And there are other issues with these mega expansions that aren't landmarks issues, including the loss of you know, porous rear yard space, which is important for drainage. There are sustainability issues, but you know, in theory, those are more like a zoning or city planning issue than a landmarks issue. And
sorry, Dave, I'm just not sure how they're budget requests.
Well, it would be a request, I guess, for funding for city planning to look into it. I don't know. Does that make sense to anyone? Paul is shaking his head.
We have made requests for studies in the past. So I think if you wanted to do that, you could make a specific, I think you need to be clear about what the study is and what you're asking them to do. You know, I don't think we've had much success. I think with getting them to do it, with the exception, I think maybe of the expansion of the special West Chelsea district, but that was tied to the rezoning. I mean, that was a commitment out of the rezoning itself. So, you know, I do think we could do that, but I just will say historically we haven't had much of a success. I think we're going a little bit back into what we kind of was trying to come up with after we had the debacle at 9th and 14th Street, and come up with both policy recommendations for Eric and the council to make, and then, you know, rule changes that we think need to happen, or rezonings that need to happen. But I don't necessarily, unfortunately, I don't necessarily know if the budget document is the best home for them.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jesse.
I don't want us to lose the momentum on that. I still think it's important. Right.
Let's commit to moving forward on those changes and having that strategic, you know, that discussion about the strategy for doing that as separate from the budget. Okay, if anyone had any suggestions, you know, Vera, your suggestion, if you can help define what that looks like, you know, we're happy to bring it forward. And again, if it's not for this year's budget, then for ongoing work as part of the committee. Thank you all. Carrie, I think we're going to go to new business.
Yes, so we have two new business items. The first is a letter to LPC regarding a request for evaluation of 550 West 20th Street, otherwise known as Bayview, which we've been talking about. David wrote a letter requesting that, you know, this building finally be landmarked. It's been 9 years since the original application, 6 years after the original application. This committee wrote a follow-up letter to LPC asking for a response, because there was no response. They responded that they were reviewing it, and it has now been 3 more years. So this is just to give them a nudge. David, I don't know if you want to say anything about the letter. Thank you for writing it. Thank you, Paul, for helping edit.
Yeah, in fact, when Landmarks wrote back in 2019, the entire substance of their letter was the agency will review the material and keep you informed of the process. And then we didn't hear from them for 3.5 years. And, you know, I had wanted to refer to that in the letter, and there's been some give and take about that. I think it's important to leave in because they told us that they would review it, you know, and they acknowledged that they had received the request. And I don't think it reflects well on them that they said that to us and then just blew us off. So I think it holds them a little bit more to account especially if we're going to be calling elected or copying elected officials.
David, can I interrupt you for
that.
a quick second and just ask you to give a little bit of background, which I should have done in the first place, and I apologize, on why this is, I mean, of course it's an issue, and we wrote a letter 9 years ago or made a request, but in the last few weeks, something's happened. So in case everybody doesn't know.
And I don't know if all of you know Bayview. I don't know, maybe Jesse, you could screen share a little bit right now and go to the actual request for evaluation that we sent 9 years ago that has some photos of the building.
Yeah, give me one.
This is the Bayview former Bayview Correctional Facility, which before that was the Siemens House YMCA, and it's the building at the northwest corner.
No.
It's the northeast corner. I always get confused that way. Pamela knows this. The northeast corner of 20th Street and the West Side Highway. It's this kind of big brown building with
Southwest.
Actually, it's the southeast corner.
Southeast, yeah.
Of 20th Street. Southeast.
And it's a historic building. It's an Art Deco building. It's by Shreve Lamb and Harmon, the firm that designed the Empire State Building, and it was designed by them. At the same time, they designed the Empire State Building. It was built in 1930, like the Empire State Building, and it has terracotta elements. Which, Jesse, if you go back one image, you can see at the tops.
One image.
To number 3, image number 3. You can see at the tops of the top windows, there are these terracotta elements, and there's more of a detailed photo further on, but they're multicolored. They're stylized ship's prows, which related to the seamen who would use the YMCA and the working waterfront right across the street. And there are other terracotta motifs that use triangles, which was the logo of the YMCA. And the building, both in terms of its architecture, it doesn't look like a lot now because it's this kind of drab brown brick, which really could use a cleaning, as could the terracotta. Plus, it still has these kind of rusty metal security screens over the windows that were there from the days when it was a correctional facility. But it's a building that would clean up. It's got a lot of architectural merit. And similar to 2 other buildings that have already been designated landmarks, the Keller Hotel in the Village and the Jane Hotel, which some of you may know, those were designated landmarks because of their association with as places for seamen to use and as kind of benevolent buildings for them. So they're considered to embody the New York or the Chelsea waterfront when it was the busiest part of New York, which was the busiest port in the world at the time. So, it's a rationale that landmarks has acted on before. And what's happened recently is that those terracotta elements at the top, all of them but the last 6 that you see to the right, including wrapping around on 20th Street, have been removed and replaced in what looks like permanent fashion with brickwork. And this didn't ring right to me. The building is under the purview of Empire State Development, and it's being renovated for this future use as supportive housing by the Office of General Services. And I contacted the New York State Historic Preservation Office about the terracotta being removed, and they said that it was news to them. And that was completely improper because ESD and OGS need to get approval from SHPO on several grounds because it's a state licensed project, a state funded project. It has possible federal funding. It's a state agency action, and because the building is eligible for listing on the National Register of Historic Places. And that last one may not sound like much, but to be eligible, a building has to really satisfy a lot of requirements. It effectively becomes a technicality whereby the owner agrees that it should be on the National Register for it to get listed. So it's a building we know would be listed, and simply being eligible is enough. That SHPO should have been informed. And SHPO has preservationists who should be advising OGS about this. Now, if the building had, since we sent in our request for evaluation to landmarks, been designated a landmark, the Landmarks Commission would be all over this, and we wouldn't have gotten this far. So, it's a way of, now is a time to emphasize to the Landmarks Commission that the building is kind of at risk. Unfortunately, their most commonly used reason for not designating a building is that it is too altered. And I'm worried that this alteration might reduce the commission's resolve to make this a designated landmark. And in fact, the removal of such prominent elements to me is alarmingly reminiscent of private owners who will do such things in order to avoid having their buildings be made landmarks. Now, according to my source at the State Historic Preservation Office, OGS has said, oh, we're going to put the terracotta back. We have stockpiled it and it'll be restored and it will be put back, but they haven't come through and met with the State Historic Preservation Office. As far as I know, they haven't given any proof that the pieces have been saved. And they're also saying that they're not going to put them back themselves, that the tenant, the supportive housing tenant, will have a restrictive covenant requiring them to put these pieces back, which I don't like at all. To me, it's really kicking the can down the road. The Office of General Services is a construction agency. They're the ones who should be putting the tiles back in. And they claim that because bits of the tiles were falling onto the sidewalk, it created a life safety emergency. And under that, they needed to go ahead without consulting with the State Historic Preservation Office. And that alone makes me very skeptical of them, because I can tell you from my experience as an architect, if a piece of masonry falls from a building, the very first thing you do is put up a sidewalk shed, and that has been done. And even after that, they proceeded without notifying SHPO when it clearly wasn't a life safety issue anymore. So I think, there's a lot of pressure that we are in a position to put on ESD and OGS, possibly through elected officials who've already been involved. And I have noticed that since SHPO and State Senator Brad Hoylman and Eric Botcher have reached out to ESD, they've stopped removing the terracotta, which is a little bit alarming in itself, because it suggests to me that maybe they're not able to remove it without destroying it. So what I'd really like is to call their bluff and say, okay, show us those pieces and put pressure on them to put the pieces back under SHPO oversight, and to come clean and to be actively working with the State Historic Preservation Office so that it can be allowed to do what it's there for. So the first letter is to LPC to say, hey, it's been 9 years. What's up with this? And the building is suffering damage, to give them a sense of urgency. And I'll leave it at that for now until we get on to the next item.
I think it's a good, since you gave all of that amazing history, I think it's good to say that the second letter is to make sure that we have some kind of, promise that the tiles are being stored properly, as well as visibility into that proof of that, and that they're going to be replaced.
And, I would be more comfortable for us to ask for a meeting. Simply because we could have some give and take and raise the issue of, well, what's the rationale for passing this on to the tenant, and why would you do that? They're repairing the parapet, which is traditionally kind of a trouble spot on a building. And, since they're doing the work, why don't they complete it the right way instead of leaving it to the tenant to do under this restrictive covenant? And, we don't know who the tenant is going to hire.
Right.
Plus
Right.
It could be years and years before the tiles go back.
Thanks, David. We'll take some questions, Betty, and then Paul.
Yeah, this development of taking down those terracotta designs really, really disturbs me. I feel kind of like personally embedded and engaged in this building because we've worked on it for so long. And I know David has worked on it for even longer, this issue. I apologize. I didn't know that there were 2 letters in the Dropbox. Is that right? 2
That's
different
right.
letters?
Yes.
Okay, because I was going to suggest we needed to have a second letter, but I guess I didn't open it up far enough. And so I definitely support the second letter, which I haven't read yet, but is ESD and everything that you said that they have. I don't think we should wait on the second letter for a meeting. I think we need to send that letter, and it should be forceful and it should be clear, and I assume that it is, and we should just move forward with this because I don't think we should wait around at all. And I understand then that our elected officials are on the case as well. Is that
Yes.
right, David? That they're on the case? Well,
Yes.
then maybe we should, is the second letter and the first letter CC'd to our elected officials?
Yes, and particularly Senator Hoylman's office has been writing to us to find out if we have any updates, to give us updates. So they're very, very interested in this.
Okay, that's great. And this is a little sidebar when we were discussing this building before, but I really, if it would be possible, I think everyone in the Chelsea Land Use Committee should go on a tour of this building. And, maybe it can be more than just our committee, it could be some more people, but you can't get the feel of it until A, you look at it from the outside, and B, you go inside the building and you see the vast spaces it has. So anyway, that's just a sidebar. Thanks.
Thanks, Betty. Paul, and then Pamela.
Yeah, thanks. I haven't seen the second letter yet either myself. Just to put a little perspective on this, in that, the former, we talked about it earlier, the women's group that was going to redevelop the site, the DSD had granted the RFP, and within that, Chelsea Land Use and the board put very heavy restrictions on anything that changed there. So a lot of those protections were in place. And then when that application, many of you might remember, they came back to us and said, we can't afford to do this. And we said, well, too bad, you can't change the building then if you're not going to meet these standards that we established for you. And so I think this is a good opportunity for us to be putting pressure on, because we're between applications. And the women's group was very politically connected. They had a lot of support from a lot of elected leaders of the city and the state. And so landmarking at that point was probably very challenging, because the politicians and the powers didn't want to landmark, which would have further restricted the women's group from doing the development. I fear that similarly, ESD is not going to want to see this building landmarked, but they'll be supportive of preservation of specific items, but probably not want to see the building landmarked. So I think we're going to have a political uphill fight to get this landmarked, but I think we should be very conscientious about the items that we want to make sure they're preserved. The outside stucco things that David has been talking about, the pool, the chapel, the basketball court, the cafeteria. There's a lot of components to this building that we want to preserve, that we can fight to preserve without necessarily landmarking. But I see this as a window of opportunity to try to get it landmarked, but I don't know how successful we're going to be. And I haven't heard anything. You heard Joe tonight talk about ESD hasn't, as far as I know, definitively made a decision about what's going to happen to the building. They're going to issue an RFP. We're looking at different options for housing. The Penn Station complex, that department of ESD, I suppose we call it, has said that they want to include some affordable housing at this site. But as far as I know, we haven't seen any RFPs or anything like that to say that we know what's going to happen there. So I think putting pressure on GSO to fix those terracotta things that they've taken down, ESD is still responsible for that building at this moment. So to stay focused on that and not to accept that, we don't know who the tenant is going to be, because they haven't decided what they're going to do with the building. They haven't issued an RFP. They haven't granted anything to anybody to say where it's going to go. So I want to take a look at that second letter and make sure our language doesn't presuppose what ESD is doing there.
Jesse, I'm just in the Dropbox looking really quick, and it looks like the admin letter is actually the material that should be going to the LPC with the LPC letter, and the admin letter is not there.
Let me see.
So
Sorry.
that may be why no one is seeing it. But that may be our fault. Regardless, we'll make sure that everybody has it before full board, and as it's been described is the intent of
So
that.
there's the clue letter to OGS regarding Bayview.
Right.
That should be there. And
I'm
then
not
there's,
seeing that. Am I in the
I'm
wrong?
not
Maybe
seeing
I'm in the wrong spot.
I see it in my Dropbox. Maybe, is it not, did it not somehow get loaded?
Yeah, I'm not seeing it, Jesse.
And now I see it,
You see
but I
it?
didn't see it a minute ago. Yeah.
That's weird.
Yeah.
I did
So
not.
maybe
Yeah,
if
I just
refresh your box, and it should be there.
But why don't can we just move on?
Of course. But it just I just wanted to make sure it was there, Betty.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. I put it in, it might have not, for some reason, not loaded, gone to the cloud or whatever Dropbox,
Yeah.
the version of it is. I
So
apologize.
you should, if you refresh your Dropbox, everybody should have access to that. Pamela?
Yeah. What Betty said about this being urgent and it being something we need to move right away and do whatever we can and get it out there and not be slow about this is, I agree with. I am such a cynic and things like this. I am convinced that those tiles, or at least most of them that they have removed, are probably history and probably got destroyed in the process, because they probably had to break them apart in order to get to the masonry behind them. Whether these people could have their feet held to the fire to insist that those that have been destroyed have to be recreated to match the existing would be an important ask.
But we need to know first, right? Whether they've
We
actually
need to
been
know,
destroyed.
and just asking them and hearing them promise us that they have been properly stored and marked and numbered and held in a bank vault somewhere. I would like to see them, please.
Right.
I think that's critical. I think we do need to have a meeting and have our eyeballs on those tiles. I don't trust them an inch, and yeah, I think it's critical that we do that. Thank you.
Thanks. So what I'm hearing is general support for both letters. David, you mentioned you wanted to be a little more strongly worded in the LPC letter, that you wanted to put in the language from the past, the response that they sent.
I would want to refer to that response, and just because they said, yeah, we'll be getting back to you, and then 3.5 years go by again.
And then regarding the second letter, I'm hearing that we need to request a meeting, which I think is in there, but we'll just make sure that that's as straightforward as we are saying right now.
I prefer to request an actual meeting rather than just say documentation that they've stored the tiles. And, I'd like an opportunity for give and take, and, who's going to be responsible for putting them back. Just the fact that they're saying, oh, well, the tenant's going to put them back.
Right.
Makes me very suspicious. If they have destroyed the tiles, well, that just kicks it so far down the road. They'll be out of the picture by the time the tenant's been there.
Right. Let's find out. Jesse, you have your hand up.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. No, I'll take it down for now. Sorry.
Gary, I do want to just in this break acknowledge that there's an attendee with the hand up.
Oh, sorry. Thank you so much. Ray. Can you move Ray over, Jesse? Thanks, Jessica. So Ray's hand went down. I don't know if that means Ray's moved over or Ray doesn't want to speak. Ray, if you want to speak, can you put your hand back up?
I think Ray, I asked Ray to come over and he did not accept. So I'm not sure, maybe.
Okay, Ray, if you'd like to speak, you can put your hand up now. Okay. So then we are where we were, which is with that summary. Would anybody like to make a motion?
Move to adopt both letters as presented in the Dropbox.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Present not eligible? Okay, motion passes. Did I miss one category? No.
Nope, you did fine.
I think we just had a few of, very short, we'd like to kind of download everybody on things that have happened, since we've last seen you. Very quickly, we gave testimony. I can't get back to my notes. On West 20th Street, LPC actually sent the application back to the architect and developer. So that was a bit of a surprise. And thank you, David, for taking over halfway through the day, because that's how long we waited to testify. And then we had a meeting with Councilmember Botcher. The city Amtrak was supposed to be there, but they were not. DCAS regarding the mitigation for the EMS location, called by Councilmember Botcher. And it was a really interesting meeting. Jessica, I don't know if you want to jump in and talk about it, but in a nutshell, they were pretty hardcore putting pressure on the city to find either an alternative site or for the EMS station temporarily or for the Gateway Tunnel, excuse me, staging area so that the EMS station could actually move in. And it seems as though the city would like us to really, like us and all of the, city agencies that are involved to expedite the ULURP so that they can actually, Amtrak can actually own the site so that then they are therefore responsible for mitigating whatever happens to the site. And that seems to be what's moving forward. I don't think I did a good job explaining that. Bert, you have a question?
Yeah, just a little clarification. You began with saying they were putting pressure on.
The
Who's
city
they?
council, Eric Botcher's office was putting pressure on
Eric's
this
office.
other city agencies to take responsibility for this issue that we have.
Thank you.
The mayor's office, and they somewhat did, but said they can't really do anything until the ULURP is approved. And so they're trying to fast track it. So once the ULURP is approved, they can put the pressure on Amtrak to find either a new location, a extended location or a different location for the debris removal, or a temporary site for the EMS station. Betty?
Yeah, I was at that meeting too.
Yeah.
First, can someone remind me where our letter is supporting the ULURP application? Has it gone out?
We are just finalizing the letter and it will go out. It is due in October, so we're still well within the comment period.
But we're close to sending it out, because I feel we should take our responsibility to do it as quickly as possible, because there was a big emphasis on this ULURP has to get done. And
Absolutely.
the other thing that was interesting is, I forget the guy's name, but anyway, he's been meeting with Amtrak that they're going to have no stone unturned to look at all the options of where the EMS station could go or where the debris for Amtrak could go. So it sounded like there might be more analysis that's being done. And I guess I was really strongly one of them to hurry up and do that and talk to us about what their conclusions are from this deep dive analysis. So that's what I took away from the meeting.
I definitely felt like they felt the pressure of responsibility and yeah, that all eyes are on them. That's what I did take that away. I mean, I'm not sure it was a complete, win, but better than before where there was sort of, everybody was just like, I don't know. That's just my interpretation.
But I think we have to keep.
Yeah, I agree.
Pressing. We have to keep pressing that. And I don't know whether it's through Eric Botcher's office or Jesse has to bug them, but we should not just sit around passively about it.
Agree. I believe we said 4 weeks and then we would follow up.
Okay.
I think if there are no other comments or questions, that's our Chelsea Land Use September meeting.
Yay.
Motion to adjourn.
Seconded.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Great meeting, everybody. Thank you.
See you
Good night, everybody.
next week.